Christmas Eve, 1 year ago. The town hall of Red Willow glowed under rows of oil lamps, packed with folks eager for the biggest cooking contest of the winter. Pots clattered, spices hissed in hot pans, and excitement rolled through the air like warm steam. At the far end of the line of work tables stood Maribel Harlow, hands gripping the faded apron her mother once used. Her dress was mended at the seams. Her sleeves fit a bit too tight. And she was the only contestant with no family, no friends, no one standing beside her. As she set her pot of winter stew on the judging table, Daphne Crow, red velvet dress, perfect curls, and a smile sharp enough to cut glided past. Her eyes swept Maribel from head to toe. She laughed softly. "Careful with that apron, Maribel. It's begging to escape you. Poor little ties." They never stood a chance. A few contestants snickered. 2 women nearby shook their heads as if pitying the sight. Maribel swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. Her mother's voice echoed faintly. "Cook with your heart, sweetheart." But her hands were trembling too badly to believe it now. When the judges made their rounds, Maribel stepped back. No one looked at her dish twice. No one spoke to her. Her stew sat small and plain among elaborate platters she couldn't dream of affording. Then the results were announced. Daphne's name rang across the hall. Applause thundered. Maribel stood behind the crowd, invisible, holding on to the only thing she had left pried thin as paper and a pot of stew gone cold. People began to leave. Laughter faded toward the doors. Maribel remained where she was, staring at her dish with eyes burning from more than smoke. That was when she felt a tiny tug on her skirt. Startled, she looked down. A little girl, Lydia Kane, 8 years old, blonde curls, bright eyes, stood beside her, holding a small tasting spoon. And next to her towered her father, Everett Kane, the head judge and the owner of the largest restaurant in Red Willow. Lydia looked up at her father, voice trembling but sure. "Daddy." "Her stew tastes just like Mom's. I remember this smell." Everett froze. He glanced at the bowl, then at Maribel, really looked at her, as if seeing something no one else in the hall had cared to notice. The town hall was nearly empty now. Just 3 people remained in that wide, echoing quiet. Maribel crushed by the worst injustice of her life. Lydia clinging to a forgotten memory. And Everett unaware that this moment would change the entire year ahead. When the hall finally emptied, only the leftover scent of spices lingered in the cold air. Maribel gathered her pot with quiet hands, trying not to let the disappointment shake her shoulders. Daphne's laughter still echoed faintly from outside. She had taken only 2 steps toward the exit when Everett Kane approached her. His boots stopped a respectful distance away, and his daughter Lydia clung to his coat. Everett cleared his throat softly. "Miss Harlow," he said, voice low, steady. "Your stew." It was honest food, thoughtfully made. Maribel blinked, surprised he was still speaking to her after she had lost so completely. Everett glanced at Lydia, then back at Maribel. "If you aren't busy tomorrow." His voice hesitated, almost careful. "Christmas Day. I wondered if you might join my daughter and me. A quiet dinner. If you're willing to cook something simple for us." Maribel's breath caught. "Me?" she whispered. "Cook? For your family?" Before Everett could answer, Lydia tugged his sleeve. "Please come," the girl said softly. "Your food makes the house feel warm again." Maribel looked at the child's hopeful face, then at Everett's calm sincerity. She had almost nothing left to lose. And maybe something small to gain. She nodded. "I'll come." Lydia beamed. Everett dipped his head gratefully. And for the first time that night, Maribel walked home with her heart a little less heavy. Snow had begun to fall in soft flakes when Maribel stood at the Kane doorstep the next evening, holding a small tin of ginger cookies she had baked as a thank you. Her breath fogged in pale clouds as she waited. The door opened before she could knock. Lydia gasped and threw her arms around Maribel. "You came!" Everett appeared behind his daughter, offering a gentle smile. "Please, come in. Make yourself at home." The Kane house was warm, the lamps glowing softly against winter shadows. Family photographs hung on the walls, Everett with a young wife whose smile looked kind, Lydia as a toddler in her arms. Maribel swallowed, suddenly shy. Everett gestured toward the kitchen. "If you'd like to prepare something simple, the pantry is yours, and I'll help where I can." Maribel exhaled slowly, tied on an apron, and began to cook. It felt different here, safe somehow. Everett handed her herbs, tasted broths when she asked, moved beside her with the quiet competence of a man who lived many years alone. Lydia sat at the table, swinging her legs, humming Christmas hymns. When dinner was served, Everett's fork paused after the first bite. Lydia's eyes widened. "Daddy." "It's perfect." Everett nodded, astonished. "It tastes even better than I remembered." Maribel flushed. I tried." After the meal, they sat by the fire. Maribel told them about her dream of opening a small restaurant, about losing her parents young, about wanting a place filled with warmth and food the way her mother used to make. Everett listened intently, hands clasped, gaze steady. "Miss Harlow," he said gently, "you have talent, real talent. But a restaurant is more than good recipes. Speed, timing, service. You'll need experience." She lowered her eyes. "I know." Everett leaned forward. "I can offer you that, if you want it." Her breath hitched. "In your kitchen? At your restaurant?" "If you're willing to learn," he said. "And if you're willing to work hard." Maribel's heart pounded. This was more than kindness. It was a chance she'd never dared ask for. She whispered, "Yes, I'm willing." Everett's smile was small but certain. "Then you start after the holidays." The first morning inside Kane's bustling restaurant felt like stepping into another world. Heat pulsed from stoves, knives clattered, cooks shouted orders across the room. And at the center of the whirlwind stood Brody Finch, the feared head chef. He eyed Maribel from boots to hair tie. "So you're the new one," he muttered. His gravelly voice carried over the pots and pans. "Kitchen's tight. Don't get in anyone's way." Maribel nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I'll try." "Try?" Brody snorted. "Try slower and you'll get trampled. Move faster." Her nerves tangled, but she followed his orders, chopping vegetables, stirring soups, carrying trays. The pace was suffocating. More than once she dropped a spoon or fumbled a plate. Brody barked over her shoulder. "Not like that. You cut carrots, not firewood. Watch the heat. Are you trying to burn the place down? Focus, girl." Each criticism pierced deeper than it should have. But Maribel didn't quit. Every break she asked questions about spices, timing, portions. Brody waved her off with growls, but he answered anyway. And by the end of the day, despite her exhaustion, she stood a little taller. She had survived her first day. The following week tested Maribel in ways the contest never had. Kane's restaurant was famous for its winter menu, and the holiday crowd only grew thicker each day. Every noon and every evening, the kitchen roared like a storm. Orders slammed onto the counter. Pots clanged. Steam rose in heavy clouds. Brody Finch barked orders so fast, Maribel barely caught half of them. But she watched. She listened. She learned. When Brody snapped, "You're too slow," She breathed deep and moved faster. When he shouted, "Not like that!" she tried again. When another cook muttered under his breath about her size blocking the aisle, she simply stepped aside and kept chopping. Late at night, long after the others had gone home, she remained alone in the kitchen, tracing the motions she'd seen Brody do, cutting cleaner, stirring with intention, timing each step. She was determined to belong here, even if no one else believed she could. One snowy night, as Maribel practiced alone, she nearly jumped when the back door creaked open. Everett stepped in, brushing snow from his coat. "I thought everyone had gone home." Maribel froze, mortified. I was just cleaning up." But the pot simmering on the stove betrayed her. Everett walked closer, peered into it. "You're practicing," he said softly. "I wanted to improve," she admitted, voice small. "There were leftover vegetables. I didn't think it would be a problem." "It isn't." Everett's gaze warmed, quiet and deep. "And I haven't had dinner yet." He sat at a small corner table like a regular customer. "Would you make me a plate from what you're working on?" Her cheeks flushed with sudden heat. She nodded and set to work, hands steadier than usual. Everett watched her, how she moved, how she tasted the broth, how she adjusted seasoning with a seriousness most people never noticed. When she finally set the bowl before him, he ate slowly, thoughtfully. "This is good," he said. "Better than good." Maribel lowered her head, embarrassed by how much his approval meant. That became the beginning of a quiet ritual. 2 or 3 times a week, Everett returned with Lydia. The little girl swung her legs at the table while Maribel cooked, asking endless, cheerful questions. "Miss Maribel, why does garlic smell like that? Can food really make people happy? Can you teach me to cut carrots?" 7s. And Maribel found herself smiling more than she had in years. Everett sat close by, saying little, but observing everything. The warmth between the three grew gently, naturally, like dough rising in a warm room. Weeks passed. Winter deepened, and Maribel began creating dishes of her own tiny experiments after hours, using scraps she saved instead of wasting. One night, she mixed roasted squash, sage, and a hint of maple molasses, something her mother had once made during a hard winter. She cooked slowly, tasting carefully, heart pounding with each small change. She plated it simply. No fancy flourishes, just honest food. Everett arrived with Lydia just as she finished. "What's this?" he asked. "Something new," she murmured. "I'm not sure if it's any good." Everett tasted first, then Lydia, then Brody Finch, who happened to walk by with a skeptical grunt. All three stopped mid-bite. Brody raised an eyebrow, the closest thing he had to high praise. "What did you put in this?" he demanded. "Just winter squash, sage, molasses, and a little patience," she said nervously. Brody tasted again, slower this time. "This could be a house dish," he muttered. "It's balanced. It's humble. It's..." He exhaled. "Real." Everett met Maribel's eyes. "Would you mind if we added it to the menu?" he asked gently. Her breath hitched. "Me? My dish?" "If you'll let us," Everett said. Brody folded his arms. "I'll train you to make it perfectly every time, and you'll teach the others." Maribel pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course. Yes." And just like that. 7s. Maribel Harlow, once the girl no one clapped for, had a dish on the menu of the most respected restaurant in Red Willow. She walked home through the snow that night, with her heart glowing warmer than the lanterns lining Main Street. A full year passed since the night of the contest. Red Willow changed with the seasons, but the busiest place in town stayed the same, Kane's restaurant, now packed every evening because of one unexpected reason. Sevens, Maribel's winter signature dish. Locals whispered about it. Travelers arrived asking for it by name. Some nights the line stretched out the door. Maribel moved with confidence now, still soft-spoken, still gentle, but no longer shrinking into herself. She knew the kitchen. She knew the rhythm. And everyone knew she belonged there. Even Brody had softened, though he would never admit it aloud. Some days he muttered, "Good work," before stomping away like he hadn't said anything at all. Everett watched all of it quietly, with a pride he didn't try to hide. He saw the way Maribel handled pressure. He saw how Lydia adored her. He saw how the staff came to rely on her. And deep down, he realized he had begun to rely on her too. On the morning of December 24th, the busiest night of the year, Brody arrived looking pale, slower than usual. His steps wavered. His breath came short. "Chef, are you all right?" Maribel asked. Brody waved her off. "Don't fuss. It's Christmas Eve. Biggest crowd of the year. I'm not missing it." But halfway through prepping sauces, Brody suddenly gripped the counter, face draining of all color. A pot clattered to the floor. "Brody!" Maribel rushed to him. Cooks gathered, worried voices rising. Everett pushed through, catching Brody's arm before he fell. Brody tried to stand straight. "I can still manage." "No, you can't," Everett said firmly. "You're burning up." The doctor, one of the customers dining early, checked him quickly. "High fever. Borderline collapse. He needs rest, not a kitchen." Brody cursed under his breath, furious with his own body. "I can't leave the line tonight of all nights, Everett. The place will fall apart." Everett shook his head. "It won't." Brody looked up at him, then slowly turned his eyes toward Maribel. She froze. "Chef," she whispered. Brody swallowed hard, voice rough. "Harlow. You know the menu. Every dish. Every timing. Every station already trusts you." A hush fell over the kitchen. Brody removed the white apron he had worn for 20 years and placed it into Maribel's trembling hands. "You're running the line tonight," he said. "And you will do it well." Her heart thudded painfully. I'm not ready. What if I fail?" At that moment, Everett stepped closer. His hand rested gently on her shoulder. "Miss Harlow," he said softly, "you don't cook with fear. You cook with heart. That's what set you apart from the start." Brody grunted. "And heart is what this kitchen needs tonight." Sevens. Maribel stared at the apron, fingers shaking. Everyone's eyes were on her. Slowly terrified, but steady, she tied the apron around her waist. I'll do my best." Everett nodded. "Your best is more than enough." The doors opened at 6. By 6:30, every table was full. By 7, orders flooded in so fast, cooks struggled to keep up. Maribel stood at the front of the line, Brody's spot. Her entire body trembled. "Fire table 4. Heat the skillet now. Where's the garnish? Move." Sevens. Her voice cracked at first. But as the minutes passed, something else took over. Instinct, practice, muscle memory. She remembered Brody's teachings. She remembered the nights she stayed late. She remembered Everett's steady hand and his quiet words of belief. And suddenly, she wasn't trembling anymore. Hot skillet coming through. 2 squash plates move. Sauce too thick, thin it with stock. Cooks responded. The line stabilized. The kitchen moved like a machine, and she was its heart. Everett watched from the doorway, awe softening his eyes. Lydia peeked in beside him, whispering, "She looks like she's meant to be there, Daddy." "Sevens," he nodded. "She is." And for the first time on a Christmas Eve, Kane's restaurant ran smoother than ever. Maribel carried the kitchen through the rush with grace, fire, and courage she never knew she had. And then the trouble walked in. When the final rush ended, one last reservation arrived. Everett quietly informed Maribel that they had requested her signature dish. She prepared it herself, steady but tired. But the moment she stepped into the dining room, her heart dropped. Daphne Crowe sat at the table, wrapped in fur, lips curved into a knowing smile. Maribel set the plate down. Daphne tasted one bite, then announced loudly, "Sevens, how disappointing. For a dish with so much chatter. It's painfully ordinary." Several customers looked over. Daphne's eyes slid across Maribel's figure. But then again, refinement isn't something you can teach. Some girls just aren't made for real kitchens. Maribel felt the old sting return, last year's shame rising like smoke. Before she could speak, Everett appeared at her side. His voice was quiet, absolute. "Miss Crowe, that's enough." The room stilled. Everett stepped forward. "You're insulting the woman whose dish carried this restaurant through the hardest winter we've ever had. If anyone here wishes to belittle Miss Harlow, say it to me." The customers murmured with disapproval. Daphne paled, grabbed her shawl, and left without another word. Everett turned to Maribel. "You owe her nothing," he said gently. And for the first time, she believed him. Later that night, after the kitchen finally quieted, Maribel stepped outside to go home. Snow drifted softly across the empty street. Everett stood near the hitching post, gently lifting Lydia fast asleep into the small blanket-lined carriage. He tucked her in carefully, brushing a curl from her cheek before closing the cover. When he turned back toward Maribel, his breath fogged in the cold. There was something nervous, almost boyish, in the way he held his gloves. "You carried this place tonight," he said. "Brody would have been proud." Maribel shook her head. "I just tried to hold things together." "No," Everett said quietly. "You led. With heart." He stepped closer, snow catching on his coat sleeves. "For a long time after my wife passed, I didn't think life had anything left for me except work and silence." His voice roughened. "But you brought warmth back into our home. You gave Lydia her laughter again. You gave me back hope." Her breath caught. Everett reached into his coat, pulled out a small wooden box, and opened it. A simple silver ring glowed inside. He lowered himself to one knee on the snow-dusted boards. "Maribel Harlow, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Everett, I will." He rose and pulled her into his arms, snow swirling like quiet applause around them. Christmas Eve. Present day. 1 year is not long. But not short either. 1 year ago, she stood alone, trembling over a pot of cold stew and the sting of cruel laughter. 1 year ago, she was still the girl they overlooked, dismissed, and mocked. But now, the small church of Red Willow glows softly beneath pine branches and warm lantern light. Everett stands at the altar, nerves tucked beneath a calm, steady smile. Lydia rises on her toes to fix his collar, giggling as she fusses over him. The doors open. Maribel steps inside, wearing an ivory gown she sewed with her own hands, gentle, lovely, confident. A quiet wave of admiration moves through the room. Lydia hurries forward to take her hand. Together, they walk down the aisle. Everett's eyes soften the moment he sees her. The ceremony is simple, heartfelt. Everett speaks his vow first. "I choose your heart, your courage, your kindness, and I will choose you in every Christmas yet to come. Maribel answers, voice trembling but steady. You gave me a home, a family, a place in this world. I will spend my life honoring that love. They kiss as warm applause fills the church. Outside, snow drifts down like gentle blessings. Maribel steps into the winter night as Maribel Kane, a wife, a mother, a chef. And no longer the girl who once stood alone in that echoing hall a year ago. This Christmas, she is truly home.